So good morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting me here today. My name is Liisa-Maija Malinen. I'm located in Finland, and I'm the founder of AI with Values, where I help organizations move beyond compliance toward genuine ethical capability in AI. So what's probably different about me than most of you is that my background is in learning design and facilitation, which means that I approach AI ethics not as a technical issue or problem, but as a human development challenge. And that's the perspective I want to share with you today. Most organizations believe that they are handling AI ethics well, but I want to show you why that belief is often an illusion. And I'll start with a scenario that many of you probably will recognize. A company board signs an AI ethics manifesto. They direct its implementation across the organization. And in the boardroom, they believe they are operating at a high level of ethical maturity. I mean, after all, they have the documents, the policies, and the press release to show for it. But down in the model logs, in the daily reality of development, the teams are patching bugs for speed, following checklists to stay within the legal boundaries, and treating ethics as a documentation task. And nobody is asking what the system is becoming or whether it still serves the purpose it was designed for. The board is hallucinating here, and they are projecting an ethical maturity that doesn't exist in practice. And this gap, this disconnect between what an organization believes about its ethics and what actually happens in daily work is one of the biggest unmanaged risks in AI development today. I call this the dissonance gap, and in my experience, nearly every organization has one. But what makes this gap uniquely dangerous with AI is that, unlike traditional software, AI systems don't really stay as they were designed. They adapt, they optimize, they evolve in response to data and use. And if no one is paying attention to that evolution, the gap between what leadership believes and what the system is actually doing grows over time. So today I want to talk about why this gap exists, why compliance alone cannot close it, and what you can do about it, starting with a 5-minute self-assessment you can take later in this session. So let me give you some context. Over the past decade, the research community has produced dozens of ethical AI frameworks and guidelines. The EU AI Act has arrived, and there are various management standards have been developed. And most organizations now have some sort of AI principles on paper, at least. And yet, empirical research consistently shows the same thing. These principles don't translate into everyday decision-making. The accumulation or overlapping guidelines create confusion rather than clarity. There are very different national approaches to AI ethics that sometimes vary quite widely. Not to mention that the definition of ethical AI is complex in itself. For example, if you think of the word fairness, that can mean very different things depending on where and who you are, and also on the context. Most developers I talk with recognize that ethics matters, but they also experience that ethical decisions are ultimately someone else's responsibility. And this is what the researchers call the principles to practice gap. And it's not a failure of good intentions, but it's a failure of organizational learning and collaboration. And most organizations try to close this gap with greater compliance measures, more audits, more checklists, more documentation, more human-in-the-loop processes. And these things are all necessary. They're really good baseline to start from. But the problem is that compliance operates within a rule-based management of procedures and risk. It answers the question, are we following the rules? It doesn't answer the question, are we doing the right thing? And it certainly doesn't answer the question, what is this system evolving to? So when you rely on compliance alone, you get the so-called checkbox AI ethics. Formally correct, but effectively blind. The paperwork is done, but no one is actually considering the impact. And when organizations adopt these compliance tools without the capacity to see beyond the immediate technical performance, they are accumulating ethical debt, which means the gap between the ethical impact of your systems and your ability to understand or govern that impact. I want to introduce a concept that explains why this keeps happening. Philosopher Andrew Feinberg describes what he calls the technical code as the logic of efficiency and profit that is so deeply embedded in how organizations operate that it becomes invisible to decision makers. It's the set of hidden priorities like speed, cost reduction, and scalability that shape decisions without anyone consciously choosing them. So every script you write, every architecture you deploy carries embedded values, whether you realize it or not. And most of the time, those values default to efficiency. And that is fine for many purposes. But for example, when AI takes over more and more of the execution, the manual work that knowledge workers used to do, the value that humans bring and the value of human thinking must be reevaluated. So the success factor really is no longer the technical accuracy, it's the ability to reflect on what these systems are doing, to notice when they drift from their purpose, and to make wise judgments under uncertainty. And this is systems wisdom. And it's the missing scaling factor in most organizations today. If we ignore this, aren't we just automating old linear failures at scale? So if compliance isn't enough, what is enough then? Sustainable AI governance depends on what I try and describe as the dual imperative. I mean, I don't try, I describe it as the dual imperative, which means that you need to address two challenges simultaneously. You need to understand how your AI system evolves, meaning that you have to be able to govern systems whose direction interacts with and may drift beyond human intention. You also need to build human wisdom capacity, which means that you ensure that your practitioners and your people possess the reflective capacity to govern wisely under uncertainty. So first, we need to understand how AI systems are evolving. There's recent philosophical discussion that argues that AI systems are not neutral tools sitting outside of human agency. They are part of it. I mean, AI already participates in human purpose. It mirrors, it amplifies, and sometimes it even distorts the goals and meanings embedded in our data, our language, and our choices. As these systems grow more complex and more adaptive, there's a real governance risk of purpose drift. By purpose drift, I mean the gradual divergence between what a system was designed to do and what it actually evolves to optimize for through self-reinforcing processes. So your compliance framework can't catch this. This requires a different kind of attention. Second, we need to make sure that you, the practitioners, your teams, your colleagues, have the reflective capacity to govern these systems wisely. So governing adaptive system requires more than technical skill. It requires the ability to tolerate ambiguity, hold opposing perspectives, and pause for reflection under the pressure of efficiency. I call this as wisdom capacity, and it develops through 5 specific dimensions of practice. I'll go through them next for you. First one is awareness of complexity and limits. Recognizing that AI operates within wider social and technical systems, it's not in isolation. Second one, tolerance of tension and ambiguity. Staying engaged and making decisions even when there's no clear right answer. Third one is perspective taking and empathy. Habitually considering how different stakeholders experience the system. Fourth is meaning sensitivity and purpose orientation. Noticing what is being implicitly prioritized in a design. For example, is this system optimizing for user engagement or user well-being? Very different things. Fifth, courageous reflective action. Speaking up about ethical concerns, even when it feels risky or slows down development. And these aren't some abstract ideals, they are skills that can be developed. But they don't develop in isolation. They grow through interaction, through teams practicing reflection together, and through organizations creating the spaces, infrastructure, and psychological safety for honest ethical dialogue. And without this, your AI governance retains a risk. You might have the structures and principles, but the people inside them are not equipped to use them wisely. So how do organizations develop wisdom capacity? It doesn't happen only through individual training events or policy updates. It happens through transformative learning, which is a process where individuals and teams question their assumptions, reframe how they see problems, and embed this reflective practice into the whole organization's everyday working culture. And this is the mechanism that connects the 2 sides of the dual imperative and makes ethical maturity development possible. To bring all this together, I developed and published last year in my white paper, the Humane Values-Driven AI Maturity Model, which is a diagnostic tool that helps organizations see where they actually stand as opposed to where they think they stand. And it describes 5 stages, and I'll walk you through them rather quickly now. And while I do, you can maybe think about where your organization fits. So stage 0 is called fear and avoidance. Here, AI feels risky and confusing. Leadership hasn't authorized its use. However, people still use it informally, creating shadow AI, which brings its own risks. Ethical reflection is driven by fear instead of awareness and understanding. Stage 1 is harm reduction and compliance. And this is, I think, where most organizations, in my experience, live today, which means that you have policies, audits, and standards, and ethics is a checkbox activity. Developers follow the rules, but rarely examine the values underneath them. And this is necessary, and it's a very good step to get past the fear stage. However, it's insufficient because you're auditing processes, but you're overlooking impact. Stage 2 is reflective innovation. And this is, in my opinion, quite a critical threshold, because here the leadership starts questioning not only what is being built, but why. Teams are exploring how their values and assumptions shape the technology they create and their choices. And at this stage, stage 2 and moving beyond stage 2, a critical skill is the capacity to be wrong. We're used to, in data science, considering wrong as a loss function and it should be minimized. But in systems wisdom, the ability to admit that there's errors and to place your own systemic bias under review is a high-level cognitive skill. Being able to recognize and admit a model's ethical bias or its purpose drift is a systemic safeguard. However, at stage 2, this kind of reflection still depends on individuals or teams who care. So it's not yet built into the organization structures. Stage 3 is called purpose-driven integration. And here, ethical reflection is now systematic instead of just project-based. AI decisions are guided by purpose and aligned with broader social and environmental values. Cross-functional, multidisciplinary teams assess impact across technical, human, and ecological dimensions. And this is where governance becomes about understanding how the system is evolving and its kind of wider impact. Stage 4, which is the highest one, is called learning, organization, and systems wisdom. This is still quite rare because AI is quite new and we're still all kind of figuring out how to use it the best way. But here the organization has become a true learning ecosystem where technology and people co-evolve. The organization applies its systems wisdom to address wicked problems, which can span social, environmental, and economic systems. And critically, what the organization learns from its actions and stakeholders changes how it operates. Decision norms, design standards, and governance structures evolve continuously. The key difference between stages 3 and 4 is that stage 3 builds ethics into organizational processes and infrastructure. Stage 4 actively feeds what it learns back into how the organization thinks and operates. It's effectively a learning system of humans, AI, and organizational structures, infrastructure. So let me take you back to where we started, the dissonance gap. It is rare for an organization to sit neatly at a single stage. When the variance between different parts of the organization is high, then you get dissonance gap. The board thinks they are at stage 3 because they signed a manifesto, and the developers are working at stage 1 because that's what the processes allow. And the critical insight regarding the dual imperative is that if your governance structures are advanced, but your human wisdom capacity is low, you have a rigid system. You have built the high-speed roads and traffic rules, but your drivers are blindfolded. And that is a massive technical and legal risk. So I'll leave you with this thought. The next generation of AI governance will not be defined by who has the best compliance guardrails. It will be defined by who has the wisest people. And your legacy will not be the accuracy of your models, but the wisdom of the systems you helped create. Good day, good morning, and I hope you all have a nice weekend.